Our reading this morning is from 2 Samuel 13. Sometime later, this happened. Absalom, David's son, had a sister who was very attractive. Her name was Tamar. Amnon, another of David's sons, was in love with her. Amnon was obsessed with his half-sister Tamar to the point of making himself sick over her. She was a virgin, so he couldn't see how he could get his hands on her. Amnon had a good friend, Jonadab. Jonadab was exceptionally streetwise, and he said to Amnon, "Why are you moping around like this, day after day? You, the son of a king, tell me what's eating at you." "In a word, Tamar," said Amnon, "my brother Absalom's sister. I'm in love with her." "Here's what you do," said Jonadab. "Go to bed, pretend you're sick. And when your father comes to visit, you say, 'Have my sister Tamar come, prepare some supper for me here, where I can watch her and she can feed me.'" So Amnon took to his bed, and he acted sick. When the king came to visit, Amnon said, "Would you do me a favor? Have my sister Tamar come, make some nourishing dumplings here where I can watch her and be fed by her." So David sent word to Tamar, who was home at the time, Go to the house of your brother Amnon and prepare a meal for him." So Tamar went to her brother Amnon's house. She took dough, she kneaded it, formed it into dumplings, and cooked them while he watched her from his bed. But when she took the cooking pot and served him, he would not eat. Amnon said, "Clear everyone out of my house." And they all cleared out. He said to Tamar, "Bring the food into my bedroom where we can eat in privacy." She took the nourishing dumplings she had prepared and brought them to her brother Amnon in his bedroom. But when she got ready to feed him, he grabbed her and said, "Come to bed with me." "No, brother," she said, "don't hurt me. This kind of thing isn't done in Israel. Don't do this terrible thing. Where could I ever show my face? And you'll be out on the street in disgrace. Please speak to the king. He'll let you marry me." But he wouldn't listen. Being much stronger than she, he took her by force. No sooner had Amnon raped her than he hated her, an immense hatred. The hatred that he felt for her was greater than the love he'd had for her. "Get up," he said, "get out." "No, brother," she said, "please. This is an even worse evil than what you've just done to me." But he would not listen to her. He called for his valet. "Get rid of this woman, get her out of my sight, and lock the door after her." The valet threw her out and locked the door behind her. She was wearing a long-sleeve gown. That's how virgin princesses used to dress from early adolescence on. Tamar poured ashes on her head. She ripped that long-sleeve gown, held her head in her hands, and walked away, sobbing as she went. Now her brother Absalom said to her, "Has your brother Amnon had his way with you?" "Now, my dear sister, let's keep quiet. It's a family matter. He is, after all, your brother. Don't take this so hard." And Tamar lived in her brother Absalom's home, bitter and desolate.
According to the theory, there are three basic human instincts or needs. There's the social need, the security need, and the sex need. The social need. Every human being is born with a desire to be liked and accepted and respected by other people. Without the human desire to be liked and accepted and respected by other people, the world would go into complete anarchy, dog-eat-dog situation. Eventually, the human race would fail to survive. Sometimes we hear it called the group instinct, sometimes the herd instinct, sometimes the social instinct. There's all kinds of words that fall under it. Companionship is one. Prestige is one. Some people want to be the leader. Without leaders, decision makers, the human race wouldn't survive. Some people just want to be part of the group. If they don't like us and accept us, we cannot be a member of the group, and we will be on the outside. So you set goals, work hard, and strive to be liked and accepted and respected by other people. Then the day comes when you say, "I have arrived." You've met your goal. You've worked at it and you've made it, and by golly, it does look and feel good when you've successfully completed that, whatever it is. The only thing wrong with it seems to be just a temporary feeling. Once you have it, you look around and say, "Is this all there is to it?" You set another goal, and you take off again. You strive, and you strive until you reach that goal, and it's not enough. It seems to create an insatiable desire for more of the same. We're not getting there fast enough. We're not getting the recognition that we want. So we begin to cut corners in the process that led us to success in the first attempt. When we do, we begin to hurt people. They retaliate against us, and that creates suffering and pain for us. It seems plain at this point that we will be on a collision course with people, places, and things for as long as we are on the path. The same is true of security or money, the second on our list. No sooner do you get it than you look around and say, is this all there is to it? John's house is bigger. Bill's property is better. We set a new goal, and we take off again. It seems to create an insatiable desire for more of the same. We're not getting there fast enough, and we're not getting the accumulation that we want. So we begin to cut corners in the process that led us to success in the first place. When we do, we begin to hurt people. They retaliate against us, and that creates suffering and pain for us. It seems plain at this point that we will be on a collision course with people, places, and things for as long as we are on this path. Finally, there's the sex instinct. No sooner do you get it than you look around and say, is this all there is to it? We're not getting it fast enough or the way that we want. So we begin to cut corners in the process and stop putting in the relational effort. When we do, we begin to hurt people. They retaliate against us, and that creates suffering and pain for us. Or we desire to do it with different people in different places at different times, and they retaliate against us, and that creates suffering and pain for us. It seems plain at this point that we will be on a collision course with people, places, and things for as long as we are on this path. Now, if all human beings could keep these three basic needs in balance and harmony, conflict would cease to exist, and you would be much happier. How many times have you and I tried to get some part of ourselves that is out of control under control again? How many times have we tried to make ourselves better? How many times have we said, I'm not going to do that anymore, and then turned around right the next day and did it all over again? Precisely because we're trying to overcome self-will with even greater self-will. Self-will cannot overcome self-will. Self-will is a God-given thing, and only God has the power to overcome what he has made. As a result, if we want our life to get better, apparently we're going to have to allow someone else to direct our thinking.
That was actually supposed to put me at ease about what was to come next. And that was absolutely terrifying. Way more powerful than I expected, actually. And obviously, it preaches for itself. Would you all rise? I'll offer a prayer, and then we'll launch into it. Holy God, in this moment, the best thing we can do is just to still ourselves. Not be too overly self-conscious, or we will just freak ourselves out. And so just still us. Tell us once more that this is about us and you. It's not about us and the preacher. It's not about us and the person sitting right next to us. In these minutes, Holy God, we are just taking our cues from your word and spirit. And so nothing is going to be asked of us except what what you do through your word and spirit and upon our hearts. Help us to take great comfort in that. That in this moment we are only asking you, Father, to bend this in a way that lands on our hearts, makes sense upon our lives and personalities, some takeaway that we can use. And the purpose of this is indeed hope and freedom that comes through surrender and faith. And it is indeed hope of a better future, a future without idols. We thank you for your word in Christ's name. Amen. You may all be seated. We are, of course, in the idolatry series. Would you do me a favor is break out in uproarious applause for the next two words out of my mouth, all right? You're just going to cheer these two words, friends. Sex sermon. For this, there's all kinds of caveat, and we'll be here till 12 because I'm just procrastinating again. Caveat, don't sit on the edge of your seat because then you'll startle for every third word of this, all right? Just relax. No part of this hasn't been vetted, and so it all went through someone else. I asked people to listen in on this conversation. And furthermore, as a parent, Sanika and I talked about it. We said, all this is good for a 13-year-old girl, and then circumstance made that decision for us. But at any rate, I talked to a 13-year-old girl beforehand. She said, Dad, don't worry. We talk about all that stuff in health class. None of this, so none of this is meant, again, don't flinch. Just take it in. And, all right, so that's good. Record button? Cool, thanks, Henry. What's the difference between appreciation and veneration? In other words, how do I know that my thing, whatever my thing is, has moved from the place of object of my affection to object of my adoration? In short, Chris, is my thing an idol? Is what you want to say. In short, is my thing an idol? And at this point in the series, we do want short answers. And so the shortest answer is, your thing is an idol. If the air is even slightly thinner where you left that thing as where you found that thing. And we are talking now about elevation. And not like monuments on mountaintops, things placed on pedestals, although also that. Sometimes we're talking about just elevation measured in degrees. Even the smallest inclines of elevation. The difference between appreciation and veneration is elevation, just that. What it means is our idols in their natural plane of existence, in their own airspace, were not bad things. They're placed up here where the air's thinner. Tim Keller says, in every case of idolatry, a good thing among many was turned into a supreme thing so that its demands override all competing values. It's a good thing in its place. It's taken from its place, relocated into a new place. And the only thing that changed is elevation. A good thing was turned into a supreme thing. What effect elevation has on our minds, I don't know. I do know this for sure. If we were to take these removable risers, and I stand on these things, take these boxes, bring them all the way up here, they would stand to about here, and then I'd stand on that, and you would say, Chris, that is absolutely tacky. That just looks absolutely tacky. Why? Because we are very thoughtful and discerning about what it is that we look up to. Right? We're very careful. Because somehow looking up to something, putting something up, has a certain effect on the psyche. And one of the central defining characteristics of idolatry is elevation. We're putting the shuns, and you heard this already, appreciation, veneration, elevation, we're putting these into some type of helpful paradigm. And so let me add one more, frustration. Begins by appreciating something in its naturally occurring setting, but then you add degrees of elevation. Veneration means worship. If I say veneration, you say veneration. And, we're talking about idolatry now, okay? All of this has to do with idolatry. Sex is good. Get it? All right? We're moving on now. We're talking about the sex god. Because after you start worshiping any god idol, it leads to frustration. Listen to this, Isaiah. They lift their God to their shoulders and carry it. They set it up in its place. There it stands. From that spot it can't move. Even though someone cries out to it, it can't answer. It cannot save them from their troubles. Frustration. And then one more. The denouement, the anticlimax, of course, is the crash, and that's just disappointment. Disappointment is how it ends. Money, power, sex, all these good things. Add elevation. And Anita read it. These are three basic human needs. The social instinct to be appreciated, recognized, accepted, prestige. And then you put prestige on a pedestal. Suddenly you're asking from it something that it can't provide. Prestige. I am asking you to caress my ego in amounts in excess of insatiable for the rest of my life forever, and never once disappoint me. I don't want you, prestige, ever once to disappoint me. One of two things is true. You're 12 years old, or you recognize how absolutely crazy that is. The preacher's always looking for the line between the lines. And no one's going to say this morning that sex isn't an idol. We get that. But the lines would seem to suggest how sex obsessed we've become. And you'll hear that. As a culture, and maybe it comes from the media, or maybe it comes from who we are, and it just becomes part of the ethos of the culture, and it really doesn't matter chicken and eggy how that happens, but you survey the culture and you get it. There's hashtag #MeToo, Weinstein, Cosby, Louis C.K., Stormy Daniels, Anthony Weiner, Tiger Woods, Canadian MPs, watch out Tiger, Elon's coming with what looks like a 4-iron. And we all know how this goes. Can you see how sex obsessed we have become? But those are just the lines, and now the lines between the lines. Well, actually, we're familiar with the pattern by now. Starts with appreciation, add degrees of elevation, veneration, frustration. Oh, now I'm becoming frustrated with my idol, and then it of course, it crashes in disappointment. If you think about the amount of time that our culture has spent in the frustration stage, you would agree. We're kind of beyond that now. We live in chronic disappointment with the sex god. And that's the stage we're at. As a culture, we live in chronic disappointment with the veneration of this thing called the sex idol. Anita read it. No sooner do you arrive and you say, is this all there is to it? I'm disappointed. Then we're not getting it fast enough or in the way that we want, and so we begin to cut corners in the process and stop putting in the relational effort. Impatience, laziness, immediate gratification. Now if it sounds like we're sort of mixing mnemonic paradigms, actually this fits in ours. Appreciation, elevation, veneration, this frustration stage is where we start cutting corners. Impatience, laziness, immediate gratification, disappointment. And then the crazy thing. Oh, just reboot it. Let's try it again. Disappointment. Oh, let's just do it again. Disappointment. Are you ready for a chuckle? Yeah, it's not going to happen. I hope we have a laugh this morning. Pamela Anderson. No? I want to say, like, word association, Pamela Anderson. I'm scared what'll be yelled out at this point. Let's just say David Hasselhoff is the word association on that one. Canadian. I don't need to tell you who Pamela Anderson is. She wrote an op-ed piece in the Washington Post some few years ago. Pamela Anderson writing an opinion editorial in the Washington Post. Take the pledge, no more indulging in porn, by Pamela Anderson. She writes, pornography is a public hazard of unprecedented seriousness and a boring, wasteful, and dead-end outlet for people too lazy to reap the ample rewards of healthy sexuality. Somewhere between frustration and disappointment here, okay? She's talking about impatience, laziness, immediate gratification. Now, the medical establishment, the medical association, has stopped short of calling pornography a public health epidemic, emergency, whatever. And with good reason, because the intellectuals and the scholars will say that there are civil liberties here. There are liberties to protect freedom to speech. Freedom, right to speech is the freedom not to have our speech censored, and the freedom also not to have our lifestyle censored, lifestyle censorship. And so there's an argument among scholars and intellectuals that we have civil liberties to protect. And that's totally fair, and I totally get that. However, having said that, in 2013, the American Psychiatric Association, APA, included in the DSM-5, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual 2013. Oh, you know APA DSM-5 as the complete catalog of personality and behavioral disorders, right? Like every diagnosis that can be given for a personality or behavioral disorder. DSM-5 included 2013, internet gaming disorder. They stopped short of changing just one word and calling it internet porn disorder would be a variation of, a very different variation, granted, but a lot of the same aspects apply. They actually put this in DSM-5, a new behavioral disorder. What that essentially means is when something is included in DSM-5, they're likening a behavioral addiction to any substance addiction for that matter, and similar in this regard. Any behavioral addiction and drug addiction have this in common: reordering the neural pathways of the brain through overstimulation. Chris, what in the world does that mean? It means that porn has the same effect as cocaine. And do you remember the last time you came off a big cocaine bender? Yeah? Remember that? It was like crash, disappointment. I need more cocaine, better cocaine, and different cocaine. Now substitute the word porn in there. APA DSM-5 has not yet included what we are here talking about in the DSM catalog, but don't quote me on that. There's only so many Google searches that I'm willing to make on the church's network with regard to this item. I walked into Karina's office and said, all right, so here's where I'm going with this, and if like the fire alarm goes off, then you know why. Oh, Isaiah. Same quote as before. It's about disappointment with your idol. But here's the thing. This one is from the Message. It just reads differently. People with money hire craftsmen to make them gods. Then they take their god home, put it on a shelf, and there it sits. Day in and day out. It's a dependable god because it's always right there where you left it. You can say anything you want to your god. It never talks back. On the other hand, It never does anything either. Crash. Disappointment. 13-year-olds. Well, oh, shoot. It's what Elisa read for us. A marvelous illustration of this. This whole continuum, appreciation, elevation, veneration, frustration, disappointment. Because you were thinking to yourself, Amnon, like, what is wrong with you? In the course of time, Amnon, son of David, fell in love with Tamar, the beautiful sister of Absalom, son of David. Amnon became so obsessed with his stepsister, Tamar, that he made himself ill. He appreciated her, elevated her, put her on a pedestal, venerated, which means he pined over her, obsessed over her, fantasized over her, couldn't think of anything else. He was sick, physically sick over her. Oh, and then he's in the frustration stage. Impatience, laziness, immediate gratification, consent. That ceases to be an issue for that person, right? It's all about laziness, immediate gratification, impatience, no consent. But then the crash, the huge disappointment. Then Amnon hated her with an intense hatred. In fact, he hated her more than he had ever loved her. Amnon said to her, "Get up, get out." Classy guy. He was so disappointed with his sex idol. But instead of screaming out at it, he screams out at her. He hates his sex idol in this moment. He's furious. How could you let me down? But he takes it out on her. And he'll do that over and over again. Now it's a sequence. More, better, different. Teenagers, just this week, one of you gave this to me, knowing the topic for this morning. A female elementary student did her entire ISU independent study unit on this topic. We're constantly asked for pictures. Teen researchers explore the topic of why people are sending naked pictures to each other in that. Appreciation, elevation, veneration, which means frustration, impatience, laziness, immediate gratification. It is called SMS. Short message? Is that what it is? What's the SMS? So short message. Not WLGTKE. You know what that one is? That's the long-winded let's get to know each other service. Do you know that one? Send me pic. Send me pic. Couldn't be shorter than that. Impatience, laziness, immediate gratification. You're sitting here. Start with this. Is what I am doing right now indulging someone else's sense of need for immediate gratification? Is what I am doing right now indulging someone else's need for immediate gratification or my own? Because then you can place it on the continuum, right? Then you know exactly where this is going to disappointment. Adults start sweeping. Swiping. I don't know anything about dating apps. It says the 5 years that changed romantic dating. That's fair, except that the article is 2 years old, and so it's the 7 years since 2013 when Tinder app was available on all smartphones. Not against Tinder. That's not the point. All right? Actually, the point is I don't know anything about dating apps. And it's Tinder, eHarmony, Plenty, O-Fish, Bumble, Hinge, Coffee Meets Bagel, Happen, J-Swipe is specifically Jewish singles, Muzzmatch, specifically Muslim singles. You know this goes on and on and on. And none of this existed when I was young. I know that sounds like super 1,000-year-old. When I was young, Sonika said the best thing yesterday, right? And it sounded like, when I was young. When I was young, to talk to my best friend, all I had to do was shout across the field, she said. Isn't that the best? How did that go, hon? Where are you? Hey, Lori? What's up? I'll ask. I don't know why I picture Lori with like a husky voice. Beats me. I'll ask my mom. What happened to Lori? When I was young, we had 6 kids. So I don't know anything about dating apps. You'll forgive me. When I was young, we'd go to church and then youth group and then fall retreat. And if that's not working for you, then you become a minister and you start preaching the local circuit. That's the dating app back then. That's basically it. You know what I call that dating app? Hims and hers. Pew for 2. Wow to vow. Yip and Yannicka. See our swipe. See our secrets. Calvinist contacts. Overtures to synod. Snap catechism. Heidel mingle. Yeah, I'm out. That's it. I'm done. When Tinder came out, even the creators of Tinder dating app really didn't know what they had created. That's not to say they knew what they created, but the consumer itself, the consumer him or herself, would define the product by how they used it. And so the creators admit this could go one of 2 ways. Tinder could be an endless virtual marketplace where singles could shop for each other like Amazon for human companionship, or it's a minimal effort, transactional pursuit of on-demand hookups like Uber for sex. Impatience, laziness, immediate gratification. Again, this isn't about like what's wrong with dating apps. That's not it at all. All right? There's positives to everything. The consensus would seem to suggest that anything in our world today, in the frustration stage, in the chronic disappointment with the sex idol stage, anything can be used for on the con side, on the dark side. Laziness, immediate gratification, laziness. And so when creators of Tinder, the female executives of the company, heard from more and more women, they in fact created Bumble then. Bumble was created by the females at Tinder. Bumble was created by these people. Why? Because they heard the same story over and over and over again. I went on a Tinder date. Oh, from women, by the way. Women said, I went on a Tinder date, sat down. Person joined me momentarily, said this, ew, you look nothing like your picture. Stood up and left. And that was the date. They heard that over and over and over again, nearly immediately. And, all right, so they made Bumble. The consensus on this is all of it locates us in a frustration phase, a disappointment phase. We're not getting it fast enough or in the way that we want, so we begin to cut corners in the process, stop putting in the relational effort. When we do, we begin to hurt people. They retaliate against us. That creates suffering and pain for us. Or we desire to do it with different people, different places, different times. They retaliate against us. That creates suffering and pain. It seems plain at this point that we will be on a collision course with people, places, and things for as long as we are on this path. I wanted something read this morning that you could actually imagine would be read out in DSM-5, behavioral addiction group therapy class, the kind of thing Tiger Woods would hear when he's sitting with his group therapy. And it is precisely this. Oh, some days it's good to preach to the choir, am I right? People say, Pastor Chris, you've got the easiest job. Captive audience, they're not going anywhere. And they're all like, touche. They're all like-minded. They're all like-minded people. And that is absolutely true. Sometimes it's good to be in a room where you can just say something and know, actually it's good just to hear that word ring out because I know it's true and it needs to be said even though we're sort of preaching to the choir here. And so to end this morning, just a few preaching to the choir things. Number one, there's all kinds of reasons to love yourself. Pick the most unconditional. This is a foundation, if you think about it. It's a foundation for the way all of us are treated by virtue of how we see ourselves, in a sense. I am more than the 1,000 pixels on my Facebook bio. People used to stare at their reflection in the mirror and either love themselves or hate themselves, but that's a very conditional and superficial way to find your self-acceptance. Today, people don't stare in the mirror, they stare at their own Facebook bio and say, this is the version of me I'm putting out there. And it's a superficial and conditional way to accept yourself. Some days I am my own worst enemy. But that too is very conditional. It's conditional on the day. Some days I like myself and some days I hate myself. Pick an unconditional reason. I am a child of God. I am accepted not because I'm acceptable, but simply because I'm accepted. That's a divine decision. I'm loved not because I'm lovable, but because God made a decision to love me. That is unconditional. Pick that as a reason to love yourself unconditionally. And that's how you deserve to be treated too. All kinds of reasons to love others. Pick the least selfish. She helps me raise my kids. We have fun together. I mean, that sounds great. But those can be self-serving. You ever heard of the Messiah complex? People that love others, save others, because it helps them turn the channel from their own woundedness. And then you're kind of using that person then, if you think about it. Marriage therapist I knew. Marriage therapist solved 10 marriages in the time it took him to watch his own relationship at home crumble. Like, what's up with that? All kinds of reasons to love other people. Love other people for the least selfish reasons, the reasons that do not serve you. All kinds of relationships. Pick a few worthy of real effort. Whatever town or village you enter, search there for some worthy axios person. That sounds so discriminatory, like worthy people. It just means a rational justification for your time. And stay in their house. That means focus your time and energy with that person. You think, how long? Again, I know nothing about sweeping, but I assume it's like this. Correct me if I'm wrong. Sweep, 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 sweep. How do I decide which page or bio or picture to spend my time on? We're encouraged here. There's all kinds of relationships. Pick a few that are worthy of real effort. You may have 685 Facebook friends, but you can't be all things to all people, so let's be honest with ourselves. In the article about Tinder, the young woman admits she was on the dating app, and then in big and bold on her landing thing, whatever it is, again, I don't know. She says, I go to A&M, fill in your own university there. I go to this uni. If you go to that school, we go to the same school. Don't swipe right. We have something in common. Please don't just stare at my picture for a millisecond and flip through. Be more discerning about what relationship you are willing to invest in. There's all kinds of ways sex divides. Find unity in diversity. The word sex itself comes from secere, Latin, meaning to bisect. All of sapiens bisected into two groups, X and Y, male and female. and never the twain shall meet. Sex divides, right? Well, that's not going to save the human population. Never the twain shall meet. Saker further means to sever, disconnect from the whole. See, sects, sectarianism, dissection is where it gets really gross. You take the whole gen pop and you sliver it down into this group and that group, and soon it's all dissected. Sex has the power to separate us. It also has the power to unite us. I mean, for goodness sakes, consider the irony that there could be no closer unity. And yet, sex, gender can separate or unite. Women in office took 40 years off our life expectancy. That was gender dividing. Men and women aren't the same. They are equal. I don't hear anyone in our world asking for sameness. That's not the point. I hear everyone asking for equality. The Apostle Paul said, now there is neither male nor female. He didn't say, oh, you're all the same. No, he said, I'm bringing this bisection back together again. That's unity that appreciates diversity. Jesus' own friends, some of his best friends were women. You know how countercultural that was in that society? It shocked the world. We are going to shock the world, friends. When we trade in pale shadows of sex idols, fantasies that ruin other fantasies, when we trade all of that in for the relational joy that is ours in Jesus Christ, let me lead you in a prayer. Holy God, I thank you for the words in your word that Elisa read for us, that they cut to the heart. It's raw. It's dark. And so we find everything in our world, all of the Harvey Weinsteins, all of the creepy, lurky, grabby tendencies in our world. They exist since the beginning of the human heart. So in that sense, Holy God, what you're teaching us here and now is not some new word. This is time-tested and true. It's as old as Amnon and older than that. You're revealing to us the same gods, small g, that have been around forever and ever. What we ask for this morning is an appreciation that these things are contained within a paradigm. You can see it begin, you can see it end. Something that's appreciated, that it is good in its own setting. It unites, it's beautiful. Adds some degrees of elevation. It's put on a pedestal. Then we want it. We're not willing to wait for it. We'll cut corners to get it. There's all kinds of relational pain that happens with that. And then ultimately we're disappointed. And we lash out at our sex idol. And then we reboot the system, do it all over again. Father, for us, this is no different than a drug addiction. And so we pray, free us. For those of us this morning who just simply need to take a step back and say, now I can see it. Now I know what it is, I can identify it in my life. Father, that we may be fully surrendered to you. That the first words may be, I have a problem. Second words, self-will is not going to overcome self-will. I need a will from outside of myself. An external power. Beyond admitting our problem, Holy God, that you would give us a power from on high. to once more unclench our hearts and hands, our knuckles around idols in our lives. That we may move from darkness to light, from dissection to beauty. That we may appreciate each other in a way where sex doesn't divide us, but appreciate diversity. None of us is the same. But that we are wedded in a union that is called the body of Christ. We are one flesh, together with each other and with you, that we may appreciate the sacredness of that and find the healing benefit of unity and love. We pray this in Christ's name. Amen.